So he scrubbed toilets at 3 a.m. for minimum wage, wearing the same torn uniform for weeks. Today, he steps off private jets and owns a cleaning empire worth $50 million. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Lorenzo wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his rubber glove. It was 3:47 a.m., and he was on his knees in the third office bathroom of the night, scrubbing urine stains that seemed to mock his engineering degree, hanging worthless on his apartment wall. 6 months earlier, Lorenzo had everything mapped out. Fresh out of university with a mechanical engineering degree, he'd landed what seemed like his dream job at a prestigious consulting firm. The salary was decent, the office had floor-to-ceiling windows, and his parents finally stopped asking when he'd get his life together. For the first time in years, Lorenzo felt like he was on the right track. But corporate life was a different beast than he'd imagined. The long hours weren't just long. They were soul-crushing. 14-hour days became the norm, weekends disappeared, and slowly, Lorenzo realized he was just another cog in a machine that didn't care if he lived or died. The work wasn't engineering. It was endless spreadsheets, pointless meetings, and projects that got cancelled after months of effort. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. Lorenzo had worked until 2 a.m. the night before, slept 3 hours on the office couch, and was back at his desk by 6 a.m. to finish a presentation for the board. When he walked into that conference room, exhausted and running on his 4th cup of coffee, he thought he was about to present the solution that would finally get him noticed. Instead, his manager stood up and presented Lorenzo's exact work as his own. Word for word, chart for chart. Lorenzo sat there, watching months of his life being claimed by someone else, and felt something break inside him. When he tried to speak up after the meeting, his manager pulled him aside and made it clear. This is how things work here. And if Lorenzo had a problem with it, there were plenty of other graduates who'd be happy to take his place. That afternoon, Lorenzo walked out. Not just from the meeting, not just from the day, from everything. He cleaned out his desk, ignored the confused looks from his colleagues, and drove home in silence. He thought he was taking a stand, thought he was choosing his dignity over a paycheck. What he didn't realize was that he'd just made himself unemployable in his field. Word travels fast in professional circles. His former manager made sure everyone knew Lorenzo was difficult to work with and not a team player. Job applications that should have been slam dunks got rejected without explanation. Interviews went well until they made those reference calls. Lorenzo's savings account drained faster than he'd ever imagined possible. The first month, he told himself it was temporary. He'd find something better, something that valued his skills and treated him with respect. The second month, he started applying for jobs outside his field. Anything professional, anything that paid decent money. The third month, he was filling out applications at retail stores and restaurants. By month 4, Lorenzo was staring at an eviction notice taped to his apartment door. His car had been repossessed the week before. His credit cards were maxed out, and his parents, who'd been so proud of their engineer son, had made it clear they couldn't help financially. His father's words still echoed in his head. "You made your bed, Lorenzo. Now you have to lie in it." That's when he saw the ad. Night cleaning crew. Immediate start. No experience necessary. Right. The pay was minimum wage. The hours were brutal, but it was work. Lorenzo swallowed his pride and called the number. His first night on the job, Lorenzo almost quit after 2 hours. The supervisor, Tommy, was a weathered man in his 50s who'd been cleaning offices since before Lorenzo was born. He handed Lorenzo a uniform that smelled like bleach and disappointment, pointed to a supply cart, and said, "You start with the bathrooms. Always start with the bathrooms." Lorenzo had never cleaned a public bathroom in his life. He'd barely cleaned his own apartment properly. But there he was, at 11 p.m., learning how to properly scrub toilets from a man who treated him like he was the lowest form of life. And maybe, in that moment, the work was backbreaking. 8 hours of mopping, scrubbing, emptying trash cans, and dealing with messes that made him question humanity. His hands cracked from the chemicals, his back ached constantly, and he came home every morning smelling like industrial disinfectant. But the worst part wasn't the physical labor. It was the complete invisibility. During those early morning hours, Lorenzo would sometimes cross paths with the office workers arriving early or staying late. These were people just like he used to be. Engineers, consultants, managers in their pressed shirts and confident strides. They looked right through him, as if he didn't exist. He was just part of the building now, like the elevators or the water coolers. Some nights, Lorenzo would pause his work and stare out at those same floor-to-ceiling windows he used to admire from the inside. Now he was on the other side of the glass, literally and figuratively. The city lights that once represented opportunity now felt like distant stars, beautiful but impossibly far away. The shame was suffocating. Lorenzo stopped answering calls from old classmates. He avoided running into anyone who knew him from his previous life. When his mother asked about work during their weekly call, he lied and said he was consulting independently while looking for the right permanent position. The truth felt too heavy to share. 6 months into the cleaning job, Lorenzo hit his absolute lowest point. It was a Thursday morning, and he was cleaning the executive floor, the same floor where he'd once presented to clients and felt important. As he emptied the trash in what used to be his manager's office, he found a printout of an article about his former company landing a major contract using ideas Lorenzo had developed. Standing there with a trash bag in his hands, reading about his stolen work generating millions in revenue, while he scraped gum off office carpets for $8 an hour, Lorenzo felt the full weight of his fall. He wasn't just broke or tired or embarrassed anymore. He was broken, completely, utterly broken. That morning, he sat in his car in the parking garage for 2 hours before driving home. He looked at himself in the rearview mirror. Hollow eyes, stubble, wearing a cleaning uniform that never quite fit right, and barely recognized the person staring back. This wasn't temporary anymore. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was his life now, and he had no idea how to climb out of the hole he'd fallen into. The conversation that changed everything happened in the most unlikely place. A supply closet at 4 a.m. on a random Tuesday. Lorenzo was restocking toilet paper when he heard voices coming from the main office area. This was unusual because the building was supposed to be empty during cleaning hours, but sometimes executives worked late or came in early for international calls. He tried to ignore it and continue his work, but one voice was getting louder, more agitated. Through the thin supply closet door, Lorenzo could hear someone on the phone having what sounded like a crisis conversation about a cleaning disaster at their biggest client's headquarters. "I don't care what it costs," the voice was saying. "We need this fixed now. The client is threatening to drop us entirely. If we can't guarantee this won't happen again, find me someone who actually knows how to run a cleaning operation properly." Lorenzo recognized the voice. It belonged to James Mitchell, the CEO of the building management company that contracted Lorenzo's cleaning crew. Mitchell's company managed over 30 office buildings downtown, and from what Lorenzo could piece together, they'd just lost a major client because of cleaning failures. Something stirred in Lorenzo's chest. Not quite hope, but something close to it. For the first time in months, he heard a problem that he might actually be able to solve. Not with his engineering degree or his corporate experience, but with something he'd learned the hard way over the past 6 months. How cleaning operations actually work, and more importantly, how they fail. After Mitchell finished his call and left, Lorenzo couldn't stop thinking about what he'd heard. He'd been working in cleaning long enough now to see all the problems. The inefficient scheduling, the lack of quality control, the high turnover because workers weren't trained properly or treated well. But he'd also started to see solutions, patterns, ways things could be done better. The next morning, instead of going straight home after his shift, Lorenzo sat in his car and did something he hadn't done in months. He started planning. Not dreaming or hoping, but actually planning. He pulled out his phone and started making notes about everything he'd observed in the cleaning industry. The problems were everywhere once you knew how to look. Companies bid jobs too low to make proper profit, then cut corners on supplies and training to stay afloat. Workers weren't given proper equipment or realistic time schedules, so quality suffered. Clients were frustrated, but didn't know enough about cleaning to specify what they actually needed. It was a broken system from top to bottom. But Lorenzo was starting to see something else too. Opportunity. Real, concrete opportunity. He spent the weekend researching everything he could find about the commercial cleaning industry. Market size, growth trends, major players, typical profit margins. What he found surprised him. This wasn't some tiny niche market. Commercial cleaning was a massive industry, worth billions, and it was growing every year as more companies outsourced their facilities management. More importantly, it was an industry where most of the competition was stuck in old ways of thinking. Small family operations that had been doing things the same way for decades, or large corporations that were so bureaucratic they couldn't adapt quickly to client needs. Lorenzo began to see a gap in the market, a sweet spot between the small operators who lacked systems and resources, and the big companies that lacked agility and personal service. Someone who understood both the operational realities of cleaning and the business principles of scaling could potentially build something significant. But understanding an opportunity and being able to act on it are two very different things. Lorenzo had no money, no business connections, and a resume that now showed 6 months of minimum wage labor. He couldn't exactly walk into a bank and ask for a small business loan to start a cleaning company. That's when he made his first real decision in months. He was going to start small, but he was going to start smart. Lorenzo began by approaching Tommy, his supervisor, with a proposition. Tommy had been managing cleaning crews for over 20 years and knew the business inside and out, but he'd never had the business education to think beyond just managing workers. Lorenzo offered to help Tommy's crew become more efficient in exchange for learning everything Tommy knew about the operational side of cleaning. Tommy was suspicious at first. "You're overqualified for this work," he said. "Why do you really want to learn more about mopping floors?" Lorenzo was honest with him. "Because I think there's a better way to do this work, and I think we could both benefit if I can figure out what that is." Over the next month, Lorenzo worked his regular shifts, but stayed an extra hour each night to talk with Tommy about the business. He learned about supply costs, client contracts, scheduling challenges, and worker retention issues. More importantly, he learned about the relationships, which clients were happy, which ones were always complaining, and why. Tommy, despite his initial skepticism, began to open up. He'd been frustrated for years with the way the company was run, with management making decisions that made no sense from an operational standpoint. Having someone actually listen to his concerns and ask intelligent questions was something he'd never experienced before. "You know what the real problem is?" Tommy told him one night as they finished cleaning a particularly difficult office complex. "These companies that hire us, they think cleaning is just cleaning. They don't understand that every building is different. Every client has different needs. And you can't just send the same crew with the same approach everywhere and expect good results." That conversation was Lorenzo's light bulb moment. The industry wasn't just inefficient, it was impersonal. Clients were treated like numbers on a contract instead of businesses with specific needs and challenges. Workers were treated like interchangeable parts instead of skilled professionals who could take pride in their work. Lorenzo started to envision a different kind of cleaning company, one that would treat both clients and workers as partners rather than resources to be managed. A company that would invest in proper training, proper equipment, and proper systems, but also one that would build real relationships with clients to understand their unique needs. The idea was taking shape, but Lorenzo knew he was still missing something crucial: credibility. He needed to prove that his ideas weren't just theories, but could actually work in practice. He needed a success story he could point to, something concrete that would demonstrate his approach worked better than the status quo. That's when he decided to take his biggest risk yet. Instead of just talking about better ways to do things, he was going to show what better looked like. Lorenzo's plan was simple but risky. He was going to completely transform the cleaning operation at one building and use the results to prove his approach worked. He chose the most challenging building on their route, a 12-story office complex that housed 3 different companies and had the highest complaint rate in their portfolio. The building was a nightmare for cleaning crews. The layout was confusing, the tenants had different schedules and requirements, and the previous teams had done such inconsistent work that the property manager was constantly fielding complaints. It was exactly the kind of account that companies usually tried to get rid of, which made it perfect for Lorenzo's experiment. He approached Tommy with a proposal. Give him complete control over how they cleaned this one building for 1 month. If complaints went down and client satisfaction improved, they'd expand the approach to other buildings. If it failed, Lorenzo would go back to following standard procedures without question. Tommy was skeptical, but agreed, partly because he was curious to see what Lorenzo had in mind, and partly because the current approach clearly wasn't working anyway. Lorenzo's first step was something no one in the company had ever done. He scheduled meetings with each tenant in the building during business hours. Not to clean, but to talk. He wanted to understand what each company actually needed from their cleaning service and what their biggest frustrations were. The conversations were eye-opening. The law firm on the 5th floor needed absolute quiet during early morning hours because their senior partners often came in at 5 a.m. to work on cases. The marketing agency on the 8th floor generated enormous amounts of paper waste from their creative projects, but never had enough recycling capacity. The accounting firm on the 12th floor was fanatical about security and needed to know exactly when and how cleaning staff accessed their offices. None of these needs were being addressed by the standard cleaning checklist. In fact, most of the previous crews didn't even know what businesses were in the building they were cleaning every night. Lorenzo created customized approaches for each floor. He scheduled the law firm's floors to be cleaned last after 11 p.m. to ensure complete quiet during their early morning hours. He worked with the marketing agency to set up additional recycling stations and adjusted the cleaning schedule to handle their higher paper volume. For the accounting firm, he developed a detailed security protocol and provided them with a schedule showing exactly when each area would be cleaned. But Lorenzo's real innovation wasn't just customization, it was communication. He created a simple feedback system where tenants could report issues or make requests through a dedicated phone number that went directly to him. Instead of complaints going through layers of management and potentially never reaching the cleaning crew, problems were identified and solved immediately. The results were dramatic. Within 2 weeks, complaint calls to the property manager dropped by 80%. But more importantly, Lorenzo started receiving something the building had never gotten before: compliments. Tenants were actually praising the cleaning service, talking about how professional and responsive the crew had become. Word spread quickly through the property management company. Other building managers started asking if they could get the same level of service Lorenzo was providing. Tommy, who had been skeptical of Lorenzo's college-educated approach to cleaning, became his biggest advocate. "I've been doing this for 20 years, Tommy told their regional manager. "I've never seen anything like what Lorenzo's doing. He's turned our worst building into our best showcase." Lorenzo knew this was his moment. He'd proven his approach worked, but he also knew that working within someone else's company would limit how far he could take his ideas. He needed to make his own path. He spent his days off developing a business plan for his own cleaning company. Not just any cleaning company, but one built around the principles he'd discovered: deep client relationships, customized solutions, excellent worker training, and systematic quality control. The financial projections were encouraging. By focusing on higher-end office buildings and charging premium rates for premium service, Lorenzo could build a profitable business even while paying his workers significantly above industry standard. The key was efficiency and consistency, doing excellent work that clients valued enough to pay for. But starting any business requires capital, and Lorenzo had none. His credit was still damaged from his months of unemployment, and banks weren't exactly lining up to lend money to a janitor with a business idea, regardless of his engineering background. That's when Lorenzo made his second critical decision. He would bootstrap his business by starting with just one client and growing organically. He didn't need a loan to buy a company. He just needed enough money to buy supplies and equipment for one building. Lorenzo had been saving every possible dollar from his cleaning job, living in the cheapest apartment he could find, and eating rice and beans for most meals. After 8 months of extreme frugality, he'd managed to accumulate $3,200 in cash. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy professional-grade cleaning supplies and equipment for a single building contract. The challenge was finding that first client. Lorenzo knew he needed to target a building owner or property manager who was frustrated with their current cleaning service and willing to take a chance on a new company with no track record. He identified his target, a mid-sized office building whose property manager he'd heard complaining about cleaning issues at a local business networking event he'd started attending during his lunch breaks. The building housed a mix of professional services firms and had recently lost 2 tenants who cited maintenance and cleanliness issues as factors in their decision to leave. Lorenzo's pitch was different from anything the property manager had heard before. Instead of just quoting a price and promising good service, Lorenzo offered to do a complete assessment of the building's cleaning needs and provide a customized proposal based on the specific requirements of each tenant. He spent a week developing his presentation, using everything he'd learned about the building and its tenants. When he walked into that meeting, wearing his only good suit and carrying a detailed proposal that addressed specific problems the property manager didn't even know he had, Lorenzo looked nothing like the desperate man who'd started cleaning toilets 8 months earlier. The property manager was impressed, but cautious. "Your ideas sound great," he said, "but you don't have any references. How do I know you can actually deliver what you're promising?" Lorenzo had prepared for this question. "Give me a 2-week trial period," he said. "If I don't exceed your current service level in every measurable way, you don't pay me anything, and you can go back to your previous company." It was a risky offer, but it worked. The property manager agreed to the trial, and Lorenzo had his first client. The night before his trial period began, Lorenzo couldn't sleep. Everything he'd worked toward for the past 8 months came down to the next 2 weeks. He'd invested his entire savings in equipment and supplies, quit his job with Tommy's crew, and put his reputation on the line with a guarantee that could destroy any chance of building his business if he failed. But Lorenzo had a secret weapon that no other cleaning company in the city possessed. A systematic approach that combined his engineering background with months of hands-on experience in the industry. His method had 5 core components, and he'd spent weeks refining each one based on everything he'd learned about why cleaning operations fail and what clients actually value. Component 1, the assessment system. Where other companies would walk through a building once and provide a generic quote, Lorenzo had developed what he called his complete building profile. He spent 3 full days analyzing his first client's building, but not just looking at square footage and obvious cleaning tasks. Lorenzo mapped traffic patterns to understand where dirt accumulated most heavily. He identified the specific types of flooring, surfaces, and materials throughout the building to determine the most effective cleaning products and techniques for each area. He documented the business hours and workflow patterns of each tenant to minimize disruption while maximizing cleaning effectiveness. Most importantly, he created what he called problem points. Specific areas or issues that previous cleaning companies had either ignored or handled poorly. In this building, that included a lobby area where salt residue from winter weather had been building up for months, conference rooms with whiteboards that hadn't been properly cleaned in years, and a kitchen area that had developed persistent odor issues. This assessment became the foundation for everything else. Instead of generic office cleaning, Lorenzo was providing solutions to specific problems that were affecting the building's tenants and property value. Component 2, the training protocol. Lorenzo realized that most cleaning companies failed because they treated workers as unskilled labor who just needed to follow basic instructions. But effective commercial cleaning requires real expertise, understanding which products work on which surfaces, how to clean efficiently without damaging equipment, and how to identify and solve problems before they become major issues. He developed a training program that was unlike anything in the industry. New team members spent their first week learning not just how to clean, but why they were cleaning specific things in specific ways. They learned about the businesses in their buildings, the importance of their work to those businesses, and how their professionalism directly impacted client relationships. Lorenzo invested in professional uniforms, quality equipment, and ongoing education for his team. But more importantly, he paid them significantly above industry standard. His reasoning was simple. If you want professional results, you need to attract and retain professional people. Component 3, the communication system. This was perhaps Lorenzo's most innovative element. He created a real-time communication system that connected his team, his clients, and himself through a simple but effective process. Each team member carried a basic smartphone with a custom app Lorenzo had developed using his engineering background. When they identified an issue or completed a special request, they documented it immediately. When clients had concerns or requests, they could communicate directly with the cleaning team through a dedicated system that ensured immediate response. But the real breakthrough was Lorenzo's weekly client meetings. Every Friday, he personally visited each building to speak with property managers and key tenants. These weren't sales calls or problem-solving sessions. They were relationship-building conversations designed to identify opportunities to provide better service. Component 4. The Quality Control Matrix. Lorenzo created a systematic quality control process that measured not just whether tasks were completed, but how well they were completed, and how the results impacted client satisfaction. He developed specific quality metrics for different types of spaces and tracked them consistently. Lobby areas were measured for visual impact and professional appearance. Office spaces were evaluated for cleanliness, organization, and minimal disruption to business operations. Common areas were assessed for hygiene, functionality, and overall condition. Every week, Lorenzo personally inspected each area using his quality matrix, but he also solicited feedback from building occupants and incorporated their perspectives into his quality measurements. This meant his team was accountable, not just to Lorenzo's standards, but to the actual experiences of the people using the spaces they cleaned. Component 5. The Continuous Improvement Process. The final component was what transformed Lorenzo's approach from just good service to exceptional results. He treated every building as a continuous improvement project, constantly looking for ways to enhance efficiency, quality, and client satisfaction. Lorenzo tracked detailed metrics on everything: cleaning times, supply usage, client feedback, and cost per square foot. But he also encouraged his team to identify problems and suggest solutions. When a team member found a more effective way to clean a particular type of surface, that technique was tested, documented, and implemented across all buildings. This approach turned his cleaning team into problem solvers rather than just task completers. They took ownership of their buildings and actively looked for ways to improve results. The results. The 2-week trial period became a showcase for everything Lorenzo had learned about the cleaning industry. By the end of the first week, tenant complaints had dropped to 0. By the end of the second week, the property manager was receiving compliments about the cleaning service for the first time in years. But the real validation came when Lorenzo presented his post-trial report. He'd documented every improvement, measured every result, and demonstrated conclusively that his approach delivered superior outcomes. The property manager not only signed a long-term contract, but asked Lorenzo to take over cleaning operations for 2 additional buildings. More importantly, word began to spread through the commercial real estate community. Property managers talked to other property managers, tenants mentioned the exceptional cleaning service to colleagues in other buildings, and Lorenzo's phone started ringing with inquiries from potential clients. Within 6 months, Lorenzo had contracts for 8 buildings and had hired 12 employees. Within a year, he was managing cleaning operations for over 20 buildings and had established his company as the premium service provider in the downtown market. The method worked because it addressed the real problems in the industry: lack of customization, poor communication, inadequate training, and minimal quality control. By solving these fundamental issues, Lorenzo was able to charge premium rates while delivering results that justified those rates. The scaling strategy. Lorenzo's real genius wasn't just creating a better cleaning system, it was figuring out how to scale that system without losing quality. He documented every process, created training materials for every position, and developed management systems that maintained consistency across multiple locations. As his company grew, Lorenzo reinvested profits into better equipment, more training, and higher wages for his team. This created a positive cycle. Better resources led to better results, which justified higher prices, which provided more resources for continued improvement. By year 3, Lorenzo's company was managing over 50 buildings, employing more than 80 people, and generating annual revenues of over $8 million. But he wasn't finished yet. Today, Lorenzo stands in the marble lobby of his corporate headquarters, a gleaming 30-story tower in the heart of the financial district. The same hands that once scrubbed toilets for minimum wage now sign contracts worth millions of dollars. But the transformation runs much deeper than just financial success. Lorenzo's company, Precision Facility Solutions, has grown into one of the largest privately owned cleaning companies in the region, with over 300 employees managing cleaning operations in more than 200 buildings across 3 cities. Annual revenues have reached $50 million. And the company has expanded beyond just cleaning to provide comprehensive facility management services. But numbers only tell part of the story. The real measure of Lorenzo's success is the impact his approach has had on an entire industry. Remember, Tommy, the weathered supervisor who first taught Lorenzo the basics of commercial cleaning. Tommy now runs Lorenzo's training department, developing educational programs that have become the industry standard. He earns more than most college graduates and takes genuine pride in the professionalism his programs have brought to cleaning work. Lorenzo changed how I think about this job, Tommy says during company meetings. I used to think we were just janitors. Now I know we're facility management professionals, and our work makes other people's businesses possible. The ripple effects have spread throughout the industry. Competitors have been forced to improve their own standards to keep up with the benchmark Lorenzo established. Workers throughout the city now expect better training, better equipment, and better wages because Lorenzo proved those investments were not only possible, but profitable. Lorenzo's personal transformation is just as dramatic. The man who once felt invisible while mopping office floors now speaks at business conferences about innovation and entrepreneurship. He's been featured in trade publications and business magazines as an example of how to disrupt traditional industries through systematic thinking and genuine care for both clients and employees. But perhaps the most meaningful change is in how Lorenzo sees himself and his purpose. The shame and desperation that once defined his existence have been replaced by confidence and clarity about his mission. I spent months feeling sorry for myself because I thought my life had fallen apart. Lorenzo reflects, what I didn't understand then was that sometimes you have to fall completely before you can see what you're really capable of building. Lorenzo's approach to business reflects the lessons he learned during his darkest period. Every employee in his company receives comprehensive training, professional development opportunities, and wages that reflect the value of their work. Client relationships are built on genuine partnership rather than transactional service delivery. The company culture Lorenzo has created emphasizes respect, continuous improvement, and taking pride in work that makes other people's lives better. These aren't just corporate values posted on walls. They're principles that guide every decision and interaction. Lorenzo's success has also enabled him to give back in ways that would have been unimaginable during his cleaning days. He's established a scholarship fund for students from low-income families pursuing degrees in business or engineering. He regularly speaks at community colleges and workforce development programs, sharing his story with people who are struggling to find their own paths to success. But his most impactful initiative is a program that provides career development opportunities for people working in service industries. Lorenzo knows firsthand how intelligent, capable people can become trapped in low-wage work because they lack opportunities to demonstrate their potential. His program provides training, mentorship, and pathways to advancement for janitors, food service workers, and others who are often overlooked by traditional career development programs. Everyone deserves the chance to build something meaningful with their life, Lorenzo says. Sometimes people just need someone to believe in their potential and show them what's possible. The business continues to grow and evolve. Lorenzo has begun expanding into other markets and exploring additional service offerings. There's talk of franchising the Precision model and potentially taking the company public within the next few years. But success hasn't changed Lorenzo's fundamental approach to work and life. He still personally visits key client buildings every week, maintaining the relationships that form the foundation of his business. He knows most of his employees by name and takes genuine interest in their career development and personal growth. Lorenzo's daily routine reflects his journey from desperation to purpose. He starts each morning at 5 a.m., not because he has to, but because he wants to maximize his time for strategic thinking and relationship building. He spends the first hour of each day reviewing operational reports and identifying opportunities to improve service quality. His afternoons are dedicated to client meetings, employee development sessions, and strategic planning. But Lorenzo also blocks time each week for what he calls field work, actually participating in cleaning operations to stay connected to the core work that built his success. I never want to become so removed from the actual work that I forget what really matters, he explains. The moment I stop understanding what my teams experience every day is the moment I stop being able to lead them effectively. Lorenzo's personal life has been transformed as well. The financial security his business provides has allowed him to rebuild relationships with family members who had grown distant during his struggles. He's purchased a home in an upscale neighborhood, drives luxury cars, and can afford experiences that were once impossible dreams. But perhaps most importantly, Lorenzo has found something that had been missing during both his corporate career and his months of desperation: genuine fulfillment. He wakes up every morning excited about the work ahead and goes to bed each night knowing that his efforts have made a positive difference in people's lives. The private jet referenced in the story's title isn't just a symbol of wealth, it's a tool that enables Lorenzo to efficiently manage operations across multiple cities while maintaining the personal relationships that drive his success. When he steps off that plane in a new market, he's not just arriving as a successful businessman, but as someone who understands exactly what it takes to build something meaningful from nothing. Lorenzo's story demonstrates that transformation is possible at any stage of life, regardless of how far you've fallen, or how impossible your situation might seem. But it also shows that real success requires more than just personal ambition. It demands a commitment to creating value for others and building something larger than yourself. As Lorenzo often tells people who ask about his success, "The cleaning business didn't make me successful. Learning to solve real problems for real people made me successful. The cleaning business was just the vehicle." Today, when Lorenzo walks through the buildings his company services, he sees the full circle of his journey. The same types of spaces where he once felt invisible now represent the foundation of an empire built on dignity, professionalism, and genuine care for others. The golden key in his story isn't a metaphor. It's the understanding that every problem contains the seed of an opportunity, and every challenge can become the foundation for something extraordinary if you're willing to learn from it rather than be defeated by it. End of the story. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories of overcoming.